That's my version of a scary movie, because I don't really like horror movies, but give me Dahmer, give me the Menendez brothers, give me true crime stories. I'm like, sign me up, but no horror movies. Not the ones that are real.
Although in college, we watched The Shining together.
That's true, because I had never seen it. Yeah. And I was real nervous about it. That stuff freaks me out. I get like nightmares and stuff too. But then I watch a whole docuseries about multiple crimes, like horrific crimes, really. And then I listen to my true crime podcast and I sleep like a baby. I don't know why.
I don't know how you do it, because honestly, that's the stuff that freaks me out way more.
I know, it should. As it should. I'm backwards.
I mean, I'm also the weirdo that when I was a kid, like 8 years old, my favorite movie was Poltergeist.
Oh, yes. I remember you telling me that.
It's a classic. That one has a lot of crazy lore attached to it, too.
Yes.
Just like the filming of it and what happened to the actors and all that stuff.
Yes.
So, I don't know.
What did we watch during Halloween time in college? Like Practical Magic, maybe?
Oh, yeah. Definitely Practical Magic.
That's
I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And
Hocus Pocus.
Shining, I made you.
And we watched The Shining.
Did you go see Saw with us?
Yes. I liked it because to me it's a little bit more of like a psychological thriller too. Mm-hmm. But I will say the one time that I saw it with you was enough. And I was like, I'm good. I thought, that was good. I'm glad I watched that, but now I am done.
Oh my gosh. Which means you probably didn't come to the on-campus pre-screening of House of Wax starring Paris Hilton.
Oh no, absolutely not. I remember you guys going to that though. I think I was actually not there for that one.
Oh my God.
I think I might have been gone, but
out of town. I just remember that for whatever reason they chose our campus as one of the places that they were going to show that movie before they released it to the general public. Yeah. I don't know, to get reactions to it or something. I really don't know. But I remember going and I was just like, okay, why is Paris Hilton in this movie? And what even is this movie?
Yeah. I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre in high school, like one of the newer ones, but I hate that. Yeah. I don't know. Those are the kind of horror movies I can't.
I'm a big fan of the slasher genre.
Yeah, I would much rather read and or watch about real serial killers that actually did things than I would watch a movie about someone who's not. I don't know. I don't understand either. Something's broken in my head.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Emily.
We're two long-distance best friends with a passion for learning about all the things that make everyday life interesting.
With my PhD in geography.
And my master's in library science.
Doing deep dives on topics is our idea of a fun time together. We'll share our findings with you on
Researching the Obvious.
So we're getting into spooky season, though.
Spooky season. Your favorite. Halloween is your favorite holiday.
Halloween is my favorite holiday. It's just fun and entertaining.
You made it more fun and entertaining for me because Halloween was never really a big one for me. And then I feel like when we lived together, I would get really excited about it because you would get excited about it. You were all about the costume planning and little decorations and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I could get into this. I haven't gone trick-or-treating since I was 12, but that was Halloween for me. That was it. It was just a day to go trick-or-treating because we didn't.
But you had to dress up to go trick-or-treating. So the dressing up was key.
Yes.
That was the key part. You get to pretend.
Our costumes were never very exciting, though. It was always just very, yeah. And then also, I'm not as good at coming up with costumes as you are. So it was easier when we lived together because you helped me. And if I tried to come up with them on my own, it's just it's stressful.
I see.
If you can come up with a costume for me, maybe I'll actually go to the Halloween party this year. Our Halloween party style is the barn party, which means we go out to the countryside of Indiana and someone hosts a giant party with a small haunted house in their barn on their property. Nice. And it's like literally next to a cornfield in a barn. That's where
the cornfield is the scariest part of that.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yeah. Cornfields are kind of creepy.
They're creepy.
Yeah.
Right? That's like the scariest part of Signs. Is when the aliens like in the cornfield.
Yes. I could do that kind of scary movie. That's like minimally scary. Just unsettling.
Right. It's unsettling more than anything else. Speaking of unsettling, I feel like our topic today is really just about unsettling things.
It is.
So we're talking about cryptids. Cryptids today. They're just like outside of being normal.
Right. We think we know stuff, but we don't. And it makes me feel kind of like, oh yeah, it's like this uncomfortable reminder that no, there's still stuff out there you don't know anything about. That no one does.
I think that's more of it. It's not that even that we pretend to know. It's just that we haven't even. We're just totally unaware. Of it existing. I was just thinking.
But at this point, I will say Bigfoot, I don't even doubt anymore. So we're not even going to talk about him.
I mean, Bigfoot is probably the most famous cryptid. Right?
Yes. The number of shows and people who have, one, reported sightings, but then two, collected evidence. I'm here for it. Like, Bigfoot is real.
If tomorrow someone showed me an actual Bigfoot that they found, I'd be like, yeah, sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What are some famous cryptids? Are Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster.
The Loch Ness Monster. The Mothman.
Yeah, Mothman.
Yeti, definitely the Abominable Snowman, aka Yeti. Okay, so the definition of a cryptid is an animal that has been claimed to exist but never proven to exist.
Oh, okay. So that's actually a much broader definition than I would have thought, because I feel like there's animals that have been claimed to exist that we then have for sure found evidence of after not finding evidence for a long time.
So they're only cryptid status until there's proof, which is why I'm saying, is Bigfoot really a cryptid anymore? Because I feel like he's out there.
I wanted in this episode to focus on some lesser known cryptids, because I feel like, like you said earlier, there's so much about Bigfoot out there. There's a lot about the Loch Ness Monster and New Jersey Devil and Mothman and things like that. So that was kind of the idea behind this episode, was just to pick some lesser known cryptids.
Yep. Yes. And I attempted to find some more regional cryptids that maybe I hadn't heard of before, that are kind of like close to where I live. But to be honest, they ended up not being that interesting. So the only cryptid that I could find that's part of Indiana history is the Beast of Busco, which is supposed to be a gigantic snapping turtle. Pretty much. But the first sighting was in 1898 by this guy, Oscar Folk. And he had a farm in Churubusco, Indiana. So that's where the Beast of Busco comes from. He had a lake, a really big lake on his farm. And he claims to have seen this enormous snapping turtle. And he told some people about it. And I think people were kind of just like, yeah, okay. And so he just dropped it. Because nobody seemed that interested, or they didn't believe him, or maybe they just thought he was exaggerating, right? And then I guess in 1948, there were two people fishing on the same lake and also claimed to have seen a giant turtle. And there were some searches for it. They even tried to drain the lake into a nearby dam to see if they could discover this giant turtle, but they never did. So that's the end of that one, really. But on the other hand, it could just be a really big turtle. Because what this led me to is Googling some more about turtles. And turtles are, they're dinosaurs, right? And they've been around for freaking ever. And there are leatherback turtles that can be 6 feet long. They can be absolutely enormous. So now, obviously, some turtles are freshwater versus seawater.
Mm-hmm.
I know that in Indiana, it's not a saltwater turtle. I get that. But I'm just saying, I think, could it have just been a really large turtle? And I would think the answer is yes. So it's not.
So
that
are
exciting.
We supposed to be scared of this turtle, or was it just
Well, no,
a giant turtle?
I didn't really get that. They affectionately called him Oscar because that was the guy who first sighted him. So I don't feel like he ever bothered anybody. I think it was just people said they saw it and they said he was huge, but they never did find him. Yeah.
All right, Indiana. You're really pulling your weight there in the cryptid category.
Cryptids, I know. Well, you know that there's not a lot of place for cryptids to hide here.
Just cornfields. I feel like
yes, that
could
true.
be scary.
That's true.
I don't know.
Since it is a snapping turtle, it could have potentially been scary because, I mean, if you've ever seen a snapping turtle,
snapping
open
its... scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
And their jaws are crazy.
Yes. So,
intense.
Yeah, in that sense, I guess you should be scared of him, but they don't have any stories about being threatened by him.
Well, sorry your Indiana cryptid search came up dry.
I know. I was kind of sad. I was just like, really? We don't have anything else? Because I did, and I'm not going to talk about this one for too long because it's, I think, a pretty well-known one too, but it did lead me to read a little bit more about the Pope Lick Goat Man. It's this whole legend in this area down by Louisville, Kentucky, about how he lures people onto these train tracks that are on a bridge. They call it like a trestle, so a train track trestle. And he lures people on there. He's able to like kind of hypnotize you or whatever. He's a representation of like a demon or something like that and lures people to their death on this bridge. Except then I also discovered in my true crime watching that actually the reason that this legend probably exists is because so many people have died on this bridge. It's very common for people to go on the bridge and it's actually an active train track. And there are a lot of people who have gone out there either because of the cryptid hunting kind of thing, but I think maybe even before that. So there have been a lot of accidents where people have been hit by train. So it's really sad.
That is sad.
So again, not a very fun cryptid.
Did you find any fun ones, Katie?
Yes. So then I knew where I needed to go next, which was Champy. Because I remember Champy because since we went to school in New Hampshire, I visited Burlington at one point with my dad. I remember learning about Champy. And he's like a fun cryptid. So he's like the Loch Ness Monster of the U.S. He's supposed to live in Lake Champlain, which is the lake that's between Vermont is on one side, New York is on the other, and to the north is Canada. And the first sighting of Champy, or Champ, goes back to 1819 by a captain who estimated it was 187 feet long and said it was an enormous... Yeah. I mean, he might have been exaggerating. We don't know. So, but 187 seems very specific. So I don't know where that came from, but that's what they said. Described it as an enormous serpentine monster with a white star on its head and a belt of red around its neck. Some people also say I should mention that Champlain, the explorer who named the lake, they claim that he saw Champy too, but then later going through his journals, they actually think it was a different kind of fish. So I didn't want to mention him as the very first sighting because it doesn't feel very official.
And I think it's important to note that Lake Champlain, if you're unfamiliar, is a very active lake in terms of shipping and like naval history. And so there's a decent amount of activity on that lake too.
Yeah. So in total, there have been over 300 reported sightings of Champy.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
That's, again, is it really a cryptid? Because I feel like at this point, everybody knows Champy. At least 300 people do. Some other notable sightings, in 1883, there was a sheriff who reported seeing him as well and said that he was only 100 yards offshore and he was so close that he could see the round white spots inside its mouth, and the creature appeared to be about 25 to 30 feet in length. So I feel like that's maybe a more recent. Yes, agreed. Yeah. I think maybe Captain Crumb didn't know how to estimate measurements.
Yeah, seems a bit excessive, but
so 25 to 30 feet link. And another notable piece of evidence, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
is in 2003, there was a research team doing a show for the Discovery Channel, and they were recording underwater activity and sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually captured echolocation sounds in Lake Champlain. That sounded very much like a beluga whale. Obviously, Lake Champlain would not have beluga whales. That's an ocean whale. So they caught that echolocation. So they don't know where it came from. They don't know what kind of creature would be using echolocation in that habitat, but they do have that audio proof too. So then the most exciting one too is just this year, there were some filmmakers who were, funnily enough, shooting a movie, I think called Lucy and the Lake Monster or something along those lines. So Champ was supposed to be, I guess, part of this story. And they had some drone shots from way up high of these two actors in a boat. And in post-production, when they were going back and editing the film, they saw something from the drone shot. Yeah, and there are several pictures, stills from the film, and then there's also a short clip on YouTube, which we will link, where you can see this. And I don't know what it is, but it is something pretty big. And they think, based on the boat, so the boat is about 11 feet long, and this big thing in the water does look bigger than that. So they apparently submitted it to some scientists. They're going to look at it and try to determine what it could be. But it is definitely a strange, large mass that's like trailing behind the boat.
Whoa.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I love this cryptid too, because I think Champy is actually also a very likely creature that we probably just don't know about yet, or that we think is gone, right? So a lot of people hypothesize that Champ is basically a plesiosaur, which is this ancient late Triassic to late Cretaceous period creature that has this really long neck, has a big kind of like horse-like head, and four flippers and this big body, so it cattled through the water and stuff. And they were anywhere from 5 to 50 feet long. They have fossils of these creatures. So anywhere from 5 to 50 feet long. And since those fossils were discovered, they've later have identified 100 species that fall within this plesiosaur category. So I make the case that this could be some kind of Jurassic, Triassic, Cretaceous, like some kind of old creature that has somehow survived and made the lake its home, because Lake Champlain back in the day used to be connected to the ocean. And so it only has become landlocked as the geological stuff happened. It makes sense that there could have been a creature like a plesiosaur that, as time went on, remained in the lake even after it wasn't connected to the ocean again, and then would have evolved as a separate creature because it's in a different environment.
I mean, the echolocation is pretty interesting. So even if it ends up not being Champy, it's still a really fascinating thing to find.
Some kind of creature that's using echolocation.
What's going on. Yeah, exactly. So is Champy, is he supposed to be friendly? Is he just hanging out?
From what I read, it's not like anybody has felt like he attacked a boat or something. It's more sightings and things like that. And then as far as just culturally, I think he's become this fun icon of Lake Champlain, right? So it's become a tourist attraction. There are statues and caricatures and all sorts of stuff for Champies. I feel like the locals embrace Champy. It's not like a scary situation. It's just more like, we know you're out there, Champy.
Yeah. That makes me think of one of the cryptids that lives by me, which is the Chesapeake Bay monster, or Chessie for short. So similar sort of, Chessie. But I thought the story of Chessie was actually really interesting because the first Chessie sightings are actually pretty recent. Most of the sightings of Chessie started in the 1970s.
Okay.
So there were a couple sightings of Chessie prior to this. Captains in the Chesapeake Bay saw some stuff, dating back to 1800s, but it wasn't really formalized as a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was more just like, we saw a strange object in the water, kind of situation. It was in the 1970s that Chessie really started stirring up a lot of interest. Chessie is described as a long reptilian creature, serpentine, with humps on its back, swims like a snake in the water, and up to 30 feet long.
Okay.
So not very big. One of the first major documented sightings of Chessie was in 1978, and it was from a retired CIA agent. So people usually point to that as one of the first documented sightings because they feel like he was a really credible source to be citing this CIA agent. But
so
the
credible. They don't deceive anyone ever.
No, I guess. Gotta trust everyone that works in the CIA for sure. But the first time that they caught it on film was actually in 1982. And it was a guy named Bob Frew, and he lived on Love Point on Kent Island, which Kent Island is just a small island in the Chesapeake Bay. And he recorded a video of Chessie and described it. And then when he was reporting his sightings, there was an artist that lived like 20 miles away who had also said that they had seen it, and he drew a picture of it, and it was the same, like the picture that the artist drew matched the description that Bob and a couple friends that were with Bob at the time said that they saw. So that's like a strange corroborative effort of seeing Chessie. The film that he caught was actually sent to the Smithsonian to have scientists look at the video. And basically, the scientists that looked at this video at the Smithsonian, they said that it was an animal. It wasn't like a log or something, but they were unable to determine the type of animal. So they recognized it as an animal, but inconclusive as to the type. The most recent sighting of Chessie that I could find was in 2014 when two friends saw Chessie less than 5 feet away from their car. Yeah. So,
and they described them the same way?
Yeah, they described it as a snake-like creature, 25 to 30 feet, with a football-shaped head.
Okay.
So, similar kind of thing. But what I thought the most interesting part about Chessie was sort of everything that popped up surrounding Chessie. A lot of people think that one of the reasons why it became a big thing in the 70s is because Jaws had just come out. And so people were paying a lot more attention to the water. But also at the same time, in the late 70s and 80s, there was a growing interest in cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay for the first time because for so long it had really been very industrial and a really big mess. And so there was a lot of interest in cleaning up the bay, and the environmental movement in the US in general was picking up speed. And so Chessie really became this symbol of a cleaner Chesapeake Bay. And so much so that there's several books and coloring books for kids that came out in like the 80s and 90s that were all about cleaning up the bay for Chessie to have a nicer space to live. So Chessie becomes sort of this Smokey Bear-esque poster child of a cleaner Chesapeake Bay, which I thought was really cool. In 1985, there was actually a law that was proposed in the state of Maryland to protect Chessie. But you know, right? Yeah. So So Chessie really has taken hold as like I think a symbol of the environmental impact of having a cleaner bay. In Baltimore, if you go to the harbor, there's little paddle boats you can rent, and they're in the shape of Chessie. And, there's like beer in Baltimore that's named after Chessie and things like that. Okay. So like Chessie's definitely been ingrained into sort of the cultural area of the Chesapeake Bay, which I think is kind of cool.
That's so much better than just a big turtle that some people saw a couple times.
There is speculation that, if Chessie isn't real, it could be maybe a really large sturgeon. It could be an eel. Like there are eels that live in the bay.
Mm-hmm. I've got one for you later. I have a guess for you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll be looking forward to that. But yeah, so I thought that was kind of cool that Chessie, whether real or not, is just the symbol of a cleaner waterway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone just adopted Chessie. They don't need proof.
Right. So we all love in their hearts.
Yeah.
Exactly. We want to clean up the bay so that Chessie has a good home.
That's right.
And then since I was looking around in Maryland, I really wanted to, this was the big one that I really wanted to look up more information about, because I feel like it is very well known in parts of Maryland, but not outside of Maryland.
I was going to say, I've never heard of this.
Yes, and that is the snallygaster. And there's also like beer and stuff named after the snallygaster, right? But,
okay.
So the snallygaster is definitely an icon, but I think it's much more localized to parts of Maryland. Most of the information that I got about the snallygaster came from the American Snallygaster Museum.
Oh, you have a whole museum?
So right now it's basically a pop-up museum. So it's a series of collections. It doesn't have its own physical space, but you can have the pop-up museum come to your school or to a festival or something like that and put on an event, and you can see all of the collections that they have about the snallygaster.
Okay.
So where does the snallygaster come from? There's a part of Maryland called Frederick, Maryland, and Frederick is actually the second largest incorporated city in Maryland. But it's not that big. It's 82,000 people. Maryland doesn't have a ton of large incorporated cities outside of Baltimore. So it's, a fairly populated area, but it's more to the west and closer to Pennsylvania. But that area was originally populated by German immigrants starting in the 1700s. And the German immigrants, they brought tales with them from Germany of something called the Schnellergeist, which means a quick spirit. And so they would basically say when any time an animal would go missing, or maybe part of a house would fall down or something like that, they would blame it on the Schnellergeist for these sorts of activities. And if you've seen barns that have a hex star on them, so not the 5-pointed star, but these are stars that have a lot of points. Sometimes they look more floral even in design and have a circle around them. These come from Pennsylvania, Dutch, German immigrants. And a lot of people believe that they were put on barns to ward off the Schnellergeist.
Oh, fascinating.
Yes. So basically, they think that the snallygaster eventually morphed out of these German tales.
Okay.
And so what the snallygaster looks like is crazy. It is described as a dragon/bird chimera. And it's said to have one eye.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Beak. A dragon-like body. And then tentacles that come out of its mouth.
No, this is the stuff of nightmares.
It is. This one is a scary one. Snallygaster's not our friend. Not our friend. He is a scary dude. In 1909, there were some reports in a newspaper that it drained a man of his blood and then tossed him off a cliff. It started to become such a big thing, like continuously reported in the newspapers in the 1920s and 30s, that towns would not allow their kids out of the house at night because they were worried that the snallygaster was going to come.
So people were actually seeing this one-eyed beak dragon.
Yeah, people were reporting it to the newspapers. And for a moment, apparently, even Teddy Roosevelt
Mm-hmm.
said when he was done with his presidency that he was going to go join the Snallygaster hunt to try to hunt this thing down because people seriously thought it was attacking them, that it was gonna hurt them. Then Teddy Roosevelt ended up going to Africa on his safari hunt instead. But for a hot minute, he was apparently going to go hunt the Snallygaster in Maryland because there were so many reports going on of this Snallygaster. The Baltimore Sun reported on the Snallygaster. The Washington Post had articles reporting on the Snallygaster. And basically it just whipped everyone up into a panic. So much so that the Baltimore Sun reported the Snallygaster's death in November of 1932 because they wanted people to
stop having sightings.
Believe that it died. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And to avoid this panic.
So they faked its death.
I mean, there were questionable things. So what happened is that they said that they found it drowned in a barrel of whiskey on someone's property.
Okay, prohibition much?
And oh wait, there's more.
Okay.
So they said they found it drowned in a barrel of whiskey on someone's property. And when they got there, conveniently, the whiskey had dissolved the body and left the bones, but then the still blew up. And so the bones also blew up. So
and that's why it's dangerous to make your own whiskey.
Yeah.
So Snallygaster became a cautionary tale.
Yeah. But fun fact, you can get Snallygaster rye whiskey from a distillery out of Frederick,
the
Maryland
irony
now, which is, fun. But what I thought was interesting about the Snallygaster is, so number one, the area around Frederick, it's very wooded. If you ever saw the movie The Blair Witch Project, it's supposed to be taking place right around Frederick, Maryland. So it's supposed to be this kind of creepy wooded area. It's sort of on the edge of Appalachia region. Western Maryland is a whole another world out there. And so exactly like you were saying with Prohibition, what they think happened and the reason why the Snallygaster frenzy started whipping up when it did is because they think that moonshiners were basically trying to use the Snallygaster as a cover for any kind of weird noises that might be in the woods, and also to keep people from going into the woods to investigate
so
where they were moonshining.
Okay.
Yeah. So they think that the reason why the Snallygaster really took hold at this 1920s, 1930s time frame was because of Prohibition and moonshiners really pushing that myth in that sense. So I don't know. Is the Snallygaster real? Seems like it's probably just German immigrant stories being used as a convenient cover-up. But again, it has definitely taken hold in our mythos of society.
Well, until it died. I mean,
well, yes,
it got blown to smithereens. Like a cartoon.
It is creepy looking though. If you look up some
drowned
pictures,
in whiskey.
It is terrifying. Yeah.
Like how symbolic.
Seriously.
That's really interesting though. I like that. Now that you say that, I do think I've heard of this in terms of just when we've come to visit you and probably drank a beer that was called something Snallygaster.
It's also just a fun word too. So I think it makes for a fun thing to use. But I feel like it's a very Maryland one.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, definitely was not familiar with that one.
Yeah. And then the last one I looked up, I wanted something that was, I guess, purely American. I don't know. That one to me, the Snallygaster's fun, but maybe comes from Germany, right? It's got that whole German origins. So I wanted something that was American from our soil. So I looked up some cryptids in Appalachia because I feel like that's just such an old part of this land here, right? The Appalachian Mountains are so old, and I figured there had to be something going on there, and I found the Wampus cat.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of the Wampus cat.
No,
before.
I've heard of being cattywampus. Does that happen?
The etymology
of
Wampus cat is a really interesting side note on this whole situation. But we'll get back to cattywampus.
Okay.
So the wampus cat is described in a couple different ways, and it's found throughout all of Appalachia. Like, you can find tales of it from West Virginia to Tennessee to Arkansas to Texas to Oklahoma, Louisiana. It's really spread. Depending on who you're talking to, it might have a different description. But some people say it's like a half cat, half dog. Some people say that it's a cat with 2 extra front legs. So it can like rear up and have extra paws in the front. Some say it has long black fur, or sometimes it's described as having spots, like white spots on its fur.
Okay.
Basically believed to come from a Cherokee legend. So the Cherokee used to live in this area before they were forced out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what the Cherokee story is that there was a village in North Carolina area that was being plagued by an evil demon called Iwa. They were trying to figure out how to banish this demon, and so they sent a hunting party out to banish the demon. And they were really scared of this demon because he could make you insane. So what happened is that one of the men of the hunting party went out. He came face to face with the demon, and it made him crazy. And so when he came back to his wife, who was named Running Deer, she, of course, was very upset by the fact that the demon had done this to her husband. And so she decided she was going to get her revenge, and she was going to take out the demon. So Running Deer, she put on a mask that looked like a bobcat, and then she took black paint and painted her body so that she would be hidden. And she went out to surprise the demon. Eventually, she ends up finding the demon. She surprises him. And because she surprised him, the demon's magic sort of turned back in on itself and vanquished the demon. And she became known as the protector of the village because she saved them from the demon. And so what people say is that when she became the protector and she donned the bobcat mask, she took on this cat spirit. And so now she is out in the woods still protecting everyone.
Oh, okay. That's a cool story.
Yeah, so they think her spirit resides in the wampus cat. However, things get twisted and white people hear this story and get scared by the whole situation.
Oh, I see. Yes.
What also was happening in this area at the time is, of course, there were actual cougars that lived in this area.
Okay.
And cougars were responsible for attacking farm animals, sometimes even attacking children. They were pretty dangerous. Cougar screams also sound like women screaming sometimes in the night. And so what they think happened is that people sort of meshed up this Cherokee tale, with the actual cougars that were in the area. And the wampus cat became this like extra scary version of an animal that's lurking out in the woods. So it was reported a lot in the newspapers that people saw wampus cats in the 1800s, 1900s. The sightings died down as cougars were extinct in the area, as they got hunted out of existence in this area. So that's why people think that it meshed with that. But people still talk about the wampus cat. I found a couple Reddit threads that were like, who grew up hearing tales of the wampus cat? And a lot of people would say, oh yeah, my dad used to tell me, don't go in the woods or the wampus cat will get you. And like those sorts of things. So people still think the wampus cat is hanging around. There's several high schools that have the wampus cat as their mascot. At least 5 different high schools have a wampus cat as their mascot. So again, sort of entered in our general psyche. I looked up the etymology of wampus cat, and I thought this was interesting. A lot of this area was populated by Scots-Irish. And so there's the word wampish in Scottish that means like askew or strange or,
off.
Yeah. And so they would describe things as wompish, which they think got turned into wampus. And then the cougar was also called a catamount, coming from cat of the mountains, right? So catamount.
Oh.
And so the term cattywampus is describing like a cat or an animal or something like this that's wonky in some way, some kind of like wonky thing. And so they think just over time it got flipped and became wampus cat.
Interesting.
I know. Okay. Yeah.
Language.
So I thought that was,
it's fun.
I thought that was really kind of cool. But I liked that this was sort of a traditional Cherokee tale. And then
well, and you know what I learned from it is you can apparently startle a demon to death. Like, I'm going to put that in my back pocket.
Right? Yeah. You just have to wear
scare
a mask
real good.
And vanquish him. Or you might need a hex star on your barn.
Oh, right. That's right.
The other option if you don't have a bobcat mask.
Okay. I'll check on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the wampus cat, you never know. Could be hanging out in Appalachia.
Fascinating. That's definitely one I had not heard of before either.
Me neither. And I'm impressed at the range that the wampus cat exists in. Because like I said, the high schools even that have it as their mascot are in Texas and...
Oh, wow.
They're in Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, and one in Idaho even.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So it really spread.
So it really spread from North Carolina origins, possibly with the forcible movement of the Cherokee, right?
Yeah. Well, or even just westward expansion in general, too. I mean, settlers also started to go out that way as well.
Well, and I'm sure pushing the American cougar off of the land too, right?
Okay, well, your cryptids were very fun.
I tried to find
very
good stories,
interesting.
you know?
Yeah, no, they are good stories. Like I said, I felt like my turtle one was just like, but where's the lore? And there's really not. But that's okay, because you know what it also led me to think about is, again, just how little we know. And so I was like, I wonder about things that used to be considered cryptids, but are now proven to exist, because this happens all the time, right?
Oh, right.
Now, maybe
the definition, like you were saying, is an animal that we have heard about but have never proven.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
There are lots of biological discoveries that happen all the time as we, increase our understanding of those things. And arguably the very deep ocean is still one area that we're not fully aware of what goes on down there, because we don't have access to it, right? So
I've heard that we know more about outer space than we do the bottom of the ocean.
Yes, it's nuts. So that's what I mean when I say like, oh, this happens all the time. But these are some notable examples where they started out being things that people assumed were not real or were just myths. And then it actually ended up being a real thing. And so the first one is a turtle. Yeah. So the Hon Kim turtle has been a part of ancient Vietnamese mythology and was said to live in the Hon Kim Lake. And there's this old myth about a warrior who went out on the lake and a giant turtle snatched his sword and went into the lake with it. So this is a tale that had been around for a long time. There were sightings over the years. And again, people just kind of thought, oh, it's just the legend has kind of taken off, right? It's attracts people to it because they like that story about a big turtle. So it was pretty much considered an urban myth or even just a tourist attraction, and then also just part of their mythology. But then over the decades, sightings would increase. And in 1998, they did discover that there is a turtle or turtles living in the lake. And these are weird looking turtles, okay? But they have a walrus-like head and their nose kind of looks like a pig nose. So they do not look like just your average turtle. Yeah, they're real strange looking. And in 2003, scientists were actually able to collect evidence that it's a Yangtze giant soft shell freshwater turtle, which is a species that had existed in China as well. They get about 39 inches long, so like a little bit over 3 feet and 20 inches wide. Maybe not as gigantic as maybe some people were saying, but also just a real strange turtle that lived in the lake for a long time, and people didn't actually think it lived there. And then it did. Yes. And then it started appearing more and more.
So they just didn't even think that there were any turtles living there. And then
they just thought it was part of
they actually found
like
one.
They just thought it was like people kind of shrugged it off. Like, no, it's just part of the myth.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be crazy.
So interestingly,
all of a sudden just be like, JK, there's a turtle.
I know, right? Here it is. So interestingly, similar to your Chessie story, they used the discovery of these turtles to actually motivate the cleanup of the lake because it was actually really in bad shape. And scientists were thinking that the reason the sightings increased so much is that the turtles started to come up to the surface more, and that they were also dying from the pollution in the lake. So, and when they're feeling close to death, or when they feel sick or whatever, like sea creatures like that will come up to the surface more often because they're like something's off. So also kind of sad. There's only like 4 alive now. They're probably on their way out. So the discovery in the lake made it pretty impressive because people didn't even think
that's
that
crazy.
kind of turtle existed.
Interesting.
So
okay.
So that one was kind of cool.
So maybe it is the next giant snapping turtle in Indiana.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it could be, but that's what I'm saying. I think it could be. So it kind of seems like reasonable to me. Okay, so the next one is the giant squid. I love.
Oh yeah,
the giant squid.
That's a good one.
It's a fun one. So there have been writings of like a giant sea monster squid-like creature forever.
Kraken.
I mean, as far back as, the Norse Kraken. Aristotle and Pliny the Elder both wrote about large tentacled beasts in the ocean. For the longest time, didn't have proof that the giant squid existed until in 2004, one was caught alive by Japanese scientists.
I feel like I remember when this happened.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I remember they actually got the giant squid and everyone was like, wait, what?
Yeah. Because prior to that, they had some, I guess, carcasses that washed up on the shore of Labrador and Newfoundland, but they had never seen a live one. So they knew that they were likely out there, but I also don't think they knew that much about them and had never seen one alive until 2004 because they're deep sea creatures, so they don't come up very often. So the largest specimens that they've found so far are 30 to 40 feet long. So they're huge.
They're pretty big. It's like a Chessie.
Yes, and there's another type of squid that's a cousin of the giant squid called a colossal squid, and they believe there are even larger ones of those based on the marks on whales. So like there are sucker marks from where a tentacle like would have latched onto a whale. And because of the size of that, they believe that there are even bigger squids that we haven't like necessarily found yet. Yes.
So are these tentacle marks where the colossal squids just like doing cupping on the backs of the whale?
I think so. Like I guess I didn't look into whether the whale was alive or dead or like where they found these sucker marks, but
that's crazy.
So they're estimating even larger ones exist, but we haven't caught them yet or like or seen them.
So first of all, the ocean is massive.
Yeah.
There could be anything down there for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm impressed that this carcass washed up on the beach because I do think about that. Like when a whale dies, do they just like fall into the bottom of the ocean and it's just the whole bottom of the ocean is just like bones?
Sometimes they get washed up like from a storm or something like that too. So that definitely happens with whales too.
Wow.
That's how we've discovered several things in the ocean is just when they happen to wash up on land. And then we're like, oh, that's a thing that was living in the ocean.
There's crazy things that live in the ocean, like all those weird bioluminescent fish that are in
in the deep
dark. Yeah.
they survive without light or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know, it's fascinating. That's why I say I believe in any sea creature. It's just about.
I feel like
just
the giant squid.
Nothing.
Yeah, the giant squid is definitely a really good example of something that existed so much in mythology. That people
like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Like,
that people definitely wrote it off as not a real animal, and then to actually find one is pretty crazy. It makes me just think that any of these other things could.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I know we laugh about it, but like I'm pretty sure Bigfoot is real because I'm just like, I don't put it past like.
Yeah, we haven't explored every single part of the North American forest.
There's some remote places that are still not very accessible, and the ocean is the other best example of just like we know nothing. Like they're just like there are reaches of the ocean that we have never seen or touched or explored at all. So who knows? For a long time, they assumed that there was no life at the bottom of the ocean because what could survive without light and blah, 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 blah. Well, they're wrong. So
Right.
So the next one, this one's kind of fun and cute. I'll post some pictures of it. The okapi. So the okapi...
I know these. These are cute.
They were considered a cryptid for a long, long time. Central African tribes and ancient Egyptians both had descriptions of a strange creature that was a cross between a zebra, a donkey, and a giraffe. And despite those kind of reports, and then even people who were able to produce some skins, Western science refuted their existence and said, no, it just has to be a hoax. Like you put this together and you're trying to like fool us. This is not a real animal. And then in 1901, the British governor of Uganda obtained skin and the skull of the animal, and they eventually captured one alive. So then it was proven to exist. And it does look like a combination of a zebra, a donkey, and a giraffe.
I could see, like I've seen some of these in zoos and stuff, and I could see where if you were describing it to someone, they would not believe like, you that it was a real animal. They're because it just has really strange
stripes on its hind legs like a zebra, but then the rest of it is brown and it kind of has a head like a giraffe. Like it has the horns like a giraffe,
and it has a little bit longer neck too.
Yes, they're related to giraffes.
Yeah.
Right. But then it has these weird stripes just on one part of its body. And apparently they are very solitary. They're very reclusive. They live in very thick wooded areas. So even though people would talk about it, sightings were rare. It wasn't something that was out on the plains eating grass. It was hiding, basically. So people talked it up to like, that's not real. That's just something you guys came up with for fun until 1901. And then the other funny one that I didn't think about, but totally makes sense, is the platypus. Because, like, what a weird animal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's another one that if someone's describing it, you're like, that cannot exist.
Yeah.
It's like a beaver duck.
And that's exactly what happened. So in 1798, European naturalists said they had discovered an animal, and they described it as a venomous egg-laying mammal with a duck bill and a beaver tail. And scientists were like, no, that's not a thing. They said that has to be a hoax. And even the pelt that they had, they're like, you sewed this together from other animals. You're trying to fool us. Again, they're like, no, we know better than that. There's not an animal like that. But then, platypus.
Yeah,
they
there
lay
definitely
eggs.
is.
They're actually venomous.
They're venomous? I had no idea.
Yeah, the males have like this thing on one of their legs that can shoot venom into.
Is
it's not
everything
lethal, but it's
in
very
Australia?
Painful.
Is everything in Australia venomous?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Like, okay.
And and one of the only mammals to lay eggs. And it does have a duck bill and a beaver tail, and it looks weird. So
it is a weird looking animal for sure.
Yep.
So I could see where people wouldn't think that was real.
They were wrong. And the other one that I thought was really interesting that also made me think of Chessie when you were talking about Chessie are just sea serpents in general, or like snake-like creatures in the sea. So one of the examples that they gave for this was an oarfish, Oarfish, and it is a giant, looks like a big ribbon, like a or an eel. The biggest one that has been recorded, a carcass washed up on shore, was 56 feet long. 56 feet long. That is a big
fish.
String of a fish. Yeah. And they are deep.
That's crazy.
You should see the pictures. But it makes me wonder if one of those could be Chessie.
Yeah. It could be.
Or some version of that, because they're set to like move like a snake, right? They glide through the water like that. And they're typically deep ocean dwellers, but occasionally will either wash up on shore or they've come to the surface when they're near death. So those are fairly like well known now, but the reason it's on the list because it resembles a lot of descriptions of what people would call like a sea serpent or a sea monster.
Yeah. Because I assume if it's a ribbon-like thing, it probably moves like a snake in the water, which is what Chessie's described as.
Exactly. And the largest recorded one is 56 feet in length. So that's one that we've seen that has somehow been at the surface or come to the surface. So just think about how big they might get if they just stayed down deep in that ocean.
So crazy. The ocean is crazy, honestly.
Yes.
I can't with the ocean.
Yeah. I know.
Terrifying.
I know. I'm like deciding right now that maybe I'm never going on a boat again. I don't know.
I mean, I feel like the ocean is scary, so I don't know.
Yeah. And then just an honorable mention, but for a long time people thought mountain gorillas didn't exist either, and they thought it was like a Bigfoot. So
wasn't a movie when we were kids,
Gorillas in the Mist, Congo? Those are the only gorilla movies.
Mighty Joe Young.
Oh yeah, that one. Well, he was like a King Kongish gorilla.
Yeah, he was pretty big. The mountain gorilla. A lot of myths.
Congo was my favorite.
Yeah.
That was a Michael Crichton book where...
That was the one where they were trying to like hunt it, right?
Yeah, well, Tim Curry is in the movie. I forgot about that. But yeah, he's basically looking for an ancient city and he's looking for treasure. And then there are these scientists who go with him who are looking for this specific species of white gorilla. And it's also supposed to just be a myth, like something that doesn't exist. And and they're scary.
I mean, I feel like in this episode, I feel like I learned a couple things that were interesting. Number one, that a cryptid is just an animal that hasn't been found yet, and that we have classified some animals as cryptids and then declassified them.
Right.
As cryptids.
Because we just didn't have proof at the time.
Them. So I think that that's really interesting because there's so much that we still don't know about the world. And so it makes sense to me that we're finding things and crossing them off this list. And then the other thing that I learned that I thought was interesting, just I feel like the stories that I found in particular, the way that they tied into this broader societal narrative and the way that these animals, supposed animals, can get co-opted either for nefarious reasons in the case of moonshiners, right? Or for good reasons in the case of the environmental movement and Chessie. And I think that that's kind of interesting to use these mythical creatures.
Right. I was going to say
present these things.
I had not thought before about there's kind of a delineation between the mythology of the animal and then the cryptid, like the actual cryptid animal. Like there's these supposed animals that maybe we don't have proof of, but then they can become mythological, like they take on life of their own, regardless of whether we prove that animal did or did not exist.
Yeah, like for example, if you're deep into the Harry Potter lore, one of the houses of the North American School of Wizardry is the Wampus house.
Oh, really? I did not remember that. That's funny.
Yeah. And I think it speaks again to that mythological status that some of these cryptids had, but they could end up being real.
I know. That's definitely the path I went down, is I was just like, let's look at all the things that we thought we knew that we were wrong about. And these crazy animals that seem like they should not exist, but here they are. So again, I just don't think it's that big of a stretch for a lot of these to be based in some reality, because I just think there's so much more that we discover all the time. And I think things that we will probably never discover that will always be unknowns. And that is spookiness for you.
Super spooky.
That's the spookiest thing to me.
If you have a fun cryptid that lives near you, please let us know, because I'm very curious now of other specifically regional cryptids that maybe have cool backstories, maybe not just our turtles. Thank you for listening to Researching the Obvious. To learn more fun facts about everything that we're researching, follow us on Instagram at Researching the Obvious Pod, all one word. You can also follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you know someone that you think would enjoy listening to all of our findings, please feel free to share or give us a review. Researching the Obvious is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Emily Fekete and Katie Nakanishi. Tune in next time to hear more obvious facts. Spooky.
It's spooky.
Spooky.